What's up, Lions of Liberty fans? You can now support this show on Patreon and get exclusive access to bonus audio and video content, including Conspiracy Corner, Degenerate Gamblers, bonus segments with guests, and so much more. Head on over to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty.
Welcome to Electric Libertyland, here on the Lions of Liberty podcast, your weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty with your host, Brian McWilliams.
All right, welcome to Electric Libertyland, episode number 75, everybody. Nice round number. Everybody loves a good 75. Passing grade, more than passing grade. And, of course, that means you can find all the show notes for today's episode at lionsofliberty.com/ELL75. Hopefully I will get a passing grade on remembering to put all of the links that we talk about on today's episode there. Because, you know, it's pretty much pass-fail for me, and I pretty much equally do both. But hopefully today's guest will give me a passing grade on my interview skills. He is a man that many of you know of, many of you have heard of. He is the host of the Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast, also the author of The Kids Are Not All Right and Freedom Through Memedom, Mr. Mance Rayder. What's up, man?
Oh, man, just happy to be here with you. I love your show, man. Listen every week.
Ah, it's adorable. It's so cute. Now watch, he's gonna save up a real zinger, like he's gonna stab me in the back as his last sign off though later on. Just you wait.
No way. No way.
Well, you know what? Your timing is perfect as a guest, because we had set this up a couple weeks ago. But you know, the first thing I wanted to talk about with you is your book, The Kids Are Not All Right. Its primary focus and target is socialism. So before I get into this story that has pissed me off and just caused me to have a Facebook flame war just yesterday, tell me a little bit about the book and tell me a little bit about overall your principle on how best to preach liberty, and of course your other book, Freedom Through Memedom, is kind of hinting at this. But you know, give me the breakdown. Why did you want to write the book, and you know, what are the principles you're using to get through and cut through the bullshit that's out there right now?
The purpose of the book was to just teach people what's going on college campuses. You see a lot of things on the news, and it's just tidbits here and there. And, you know, the liberal media is not going to, you know, give you the whole story. They're going to make it sound like, you know, if leftists on college campus are upset about something, it's probably because, you know, 10 Nazis marched onto the campus and started beating people
right. It's
up.
like if leftists are upset about something, as far as the mainstream media is concerned, it's for the good cause. You know, they're obviously on the side of right.
Yeah. So I wrote the book to show how what's going on college campuses, that it's the professors who are teaching socialism, how it's manifesting itself in how the students act and what they think, how they're reacting to it on campus and off. You know, I talk about Antifa and groups like that. And then the most important thing to me is how it's making its way into human resources offices in some of the biggest corporations in the country, and how it's coming down to how it's affecting normal people. You know, I work for a huge company. I've had to take these bullshit classes where, you know, you have to agree to call someone whatever their preferred pronoun is, and if you don't do it, you can get fired, and that kind of thing follows you.
Yeah,
so
you mentioned that in the book. And specifically, you talked about Google and James Dalmore, and yeah, exactly right. That's the thing that really stuck with me as well. In one of the chapters is that point that it does follow you. I mean, it's like having the permanent record in school where you're suspended for looking up a girl's dress, but even more so now, because instead of just having this black mark, which maybe you'll get, erased after 7 years, this follows you forever, especially in the age of the internet where everything's permanent. There, you know, no clerical error is going to absolve you of your sins against the left.
Well, and you mentioned looking up a girl's dress. Okay. I mean, I did it when I was in school, but it's something, at least you did something to get in trouble for. Right. This is thought policing. You basically think differently than these people, and these people are going to do whatever they can to destroy your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can't. People have to know about that, and especially kids, especially if a kid's thinking about going to college, if a kid's already in college. I wrote my book for that, for kids who are going to college, so they know what they're going to run into. Kids that are already in college, so they can understand what they're going through, and for parents and anyone to understand just how dangerous this is. I mean, they're preaching an ideology that killed almost half of my family.
Mm. Well, tell me a little bit. Where's your family from? Like, what's the background there?
Well, my grandmother's family is from the Ukraine, and her mom escaped in 1917. When the revolution started, and she left behind 6 sisters. And after 1933, after Holodomor, they've never heard from again.
Yeah. And by the way, so the Holodomor, I don't know how many people listening to the show will know what that is. Specifically, because the truth, I did not know what the term was, and I was really interested to read about it in your book. So explain that a little bit. This is basically in the Ukraine in regards to famine, and the whole story is fascinating too, with the journalist who goes to report on this. It was called the Ukrainian utopian state. So tell us a little bit about that, because I guarantee I'm not the only one who lives in ignorance. I'm the only one proud to do it, but many other people probably.
It basically stands for the starvation. It can be translated a couple different ways. But in 1932, the Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, they realized that they probably were going to have a famine the following year. So they decided to rely on the motherland, on Russia, on Moscow for provisions. Well, Moscow didn't plan for it either. So when everything came down to how they were going to ration things out, there were some groups in the Ukraine who had already been talking about rising up against Moscow. So basically, Moscow just decided that they would just let them starve. And there's figures thrown all over the place, but when you average out what most historians believe is that 7 million people in the Ukraine from 1933 to 1934 starved to death.
And this, of course, is in pre-internet days and pre-easy transportation days, for that matter, so that you make an instance of a journalist who traveled there to report on it and then didn't report the circumstances. And instead, there was nothing there to combat the propaganda put out by the Soviet government saying that, everything in the Ukraine is fantastic and it's operating like a well-oiled machine instead of a starvation facility, essentially a statewide or a nationwide starvation machine that they've created.
Well, every once in a while, some people may hear the term referring to a reporter that they're pulling a Walter Duranty. And Walter Duranty was a New York Times reporter who went to the Soviet Union to report on, because it was a paradise, it was a utopia, and he went there and he found and what he found was that people were starving to death in the Ukraine, and people were starving to death in Russia as well. But when he came back, his ideology, he brought back and reported what his heart was with the communists. So he came back and he said that there was absolutely nothing wrong. Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and now to this day, when a journalist pulls one of those moves, like when they start reporting, in 2011, how so many internet, like Vox and places like that, were reporting on the miracles of Venezuela.
Right.
I would call that, they're pulling a Walter Duranty, because even at that time, when things were a lot better than they were now, they were still horrible.
Yeah, well, that ties perfectly into this first topic, because just it was about a month ago, I think, that John Oliver did this extended piece on Venezuela, and essentially it was just one of the most objectively stupid things I've ever seen in my life, and there's been several people that have debunked this concept that he put forth, that Venezuela as a whole, and it's the same argument that socialists constantly make, that Venezuela is not the fault of socialism, but in truth, just the fault of the people who managed to take charge of it, that have ruined it and left the socialist ideal. And he uses all these different instances where he's pulling out, he says, well, he got rid of half the people in charge here, and he changed the laws there, and this isn't true socialism. And what drives me absolutely up the goddamn wall with this shit is that every time we see socialism put into place, this is inevitably what happens. Not only in the power play, but also just the breakdown of the economy, the nationalization of resources, the ostracization of people that actually know what they're doing in the private side of things as they nationalize the gas industry and the oil industry. So it just, I posted this story on my Facebook wall, basically saying socialism is murder, de facto. Now, granted, that's a very bold statement. I knew it when I did it, but I'm just so sick of people apologizing for socialism and explaining away any fault with it as if it's some problem with the mechanic and not a problem with the actual fucking machine.
Well, Venezuela is pure socialism. What Chavez, the plan he laid out was nationalize all that, and the thing that really pisses me off about these people is that they'll point to fucking countries like Sweden and Norway and Denmark. And why are they as prosperous as they are right now? Because for 100 years they were more free market than we were, than we've been in 150 years.
Oh yeah.
So Sweden from 1850 to 1950 had one of the freest markets on the planet. They were like number 2 in the world in 1950 as far as riches. And then of course they started to institute the welfare state. And the only reason that has not collapsed right now is because they're still living off of 100 years of free markets.
Oh, without a doubt. And at the worst, you could say that they have a hybrid system in place. And that's what these people are insisting that, whoa, it's a socialist. No, it's not. They still have an economy that's based on trade and capitalism and profit making. While they have certain apparatus that you could say are socialist applications of certain industries. Okay, that does not make the country socialist. And even then, we're seeing, like, Sweden's a good example. Within Sweden, the healthcare system, you still have people that can afford to opting to do private insurance because it's still slow. It's still cumbersome and they still can't get the attention they need in the time they need it. And all of the other social programs that people advocate for, like the universal basic income and a variety of other programs, they're rolling those back because they have not worked.
Right. And in Denmark, it's the personal income tax is 55%.
Yeah.
And people, of course you can make the argument, well, they don't have to pay for health care. They don't have to pay for this. But, in Sweden, just look at Sweden, for example. I mean, the creator of IKEA is from Sweden. Mm-hmm. That's not a national. The government of Sweden doesn't own IKEA.
Right. Whereas in Venezuela, if IKEA would have been nationalized by the Swedes and now would currently be out of business.
Yeah, I mean, they just or you look at a country like Norway, which I'm trying to look up their population right now.
Oh yeah, it's minuscule.
They have this small population and they took what would be considered their social security, and they invested it in the oil industry, and they did really well. So people can actually live. But look at this: the population, 2018 estimate, 5 million.
Right. Yeah, and they don't have to deal with any number of the issues that we have. Like, for example, if you try to implement that in America, to your point, it simply doesn't work with the sheer scale of people. And also you don't have these countries over there, at least before very recent times, dealing with issues like immigration. And wasn't it just Denmark that completely closed off all immigration recently? Like one of the Scandinavian countries just completely shut down all immigration. And I know that I think it actually is Sweden, was dealing with all sorts of issues with immigrants that were in the country, causing a lot of crime and violence and rioting because they considered themselves second-class citizens as far as the way that they were treated and the benefits they were receiving.
Well, Sweden brings immigrants into the country, and especially migrants, people who are escaping the wars of the Middle East, and they bring them in, shove them into a ghetto, give them checks, don't expect them to learn the language. They're basically turn them into hostages.
Right.
You throw them into a neighborhood, people say, and, I think Tim Pool's been over there and said, white people, the white population just doesn't go into these neighborhoods and they don't want them to go into these neighborhoods. No. So it's not like here, I was asking, I did an interview earlier and I said, how come these people can come from the same country in the Middle East and come here and integrate well, but go there and not integrate well. Well, there has to be it has something to do with how the government and how the culture is dealing with them. And I think the culture here just is more conducive to bringing somebody in and, having them be able to make money immediately and be able to feel like some kind of self-worth.
Right. Well, think about it on the other hand, too. It's like if you've got this insanely high tax rate, even if the business is good and all the indicators are that typically you can make, if you have a business, you can still make money off it because they do have very low regulations in a lot of circumstances. But with the tax rate that high, if you're an immigrant and you try to get started, my God, how much money are they taking out of that where you're just basically stuck in a rut? And on top of that, too, this is a side point I want to make as well, is that one of the things that during this Facebook flame war, which eventually, I don't know about you, but I have to check out at some point. I'll post stuff, I'll argue back and forth a few times, and then I just go, I got other things to do. But they always say, they go, well, what about the free healthcare of socialism? And like we're talking about a 55% tax rate, that doesn't sound free to me. That sounds like someone is getting taxed up the asshole to provide this healthcare. So I asked you, Phil, what's your definition of free? And it just like their minds were blown. It's like they couldn't understand the concept that like they're just going off the rails talking about, well, what do you think is free and real freedom to do this and that? And I'm just saying that you can't say that something comes from nothing and benefits all of humanity. There's always going to be a cost, whether that is monetary, whether that is human cost, as we see in a lot of places, like Venezuela. They don't have any money now, so we're seeing all human cost go into supporting this completely corrupt socialist system in play.
Well, Cuba has free health care there, and I don't know what their taxation is, but I don't think it's high at all. But I mean, and Michael Moore did a documentary about how great the healthcare system is there. Then how come people from around the world aren't going there?
Exactly. They show them the one hospital that's not completely covered in rat feces and people bleeding out in the hallways.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Miami for 20 years. I know, I had Cuban friends that I considered family, that my family and their family were as close as regular family. And they grew up in Cuba. They're not the children of immigrants. They are the immigrants, and they did not want to go back. The only reason they would want to go back is to try and get their family out. Yeah. But I mean, nobody is, turning a 1948 Ford pickup truck into a friggin' boat to escape, the best healthcare in the world.
Exactly right. Good point. But it's also, it's like widely people ignore the stories from those people that actually are coming from these socialist countries. And it, again, Denmark and Sweden and Norway, all these places are not true socialists. So when you hear people come over from there and they say, oh, well, I love my country, I love the healthcare, I love all that, it's like, okay, great. Well, you're accustomed to it. And again, you're living off the largesse of capitalism that has enabled this system to be put into place. But they ignore the people that are from the countries where 100 million people is the calculation by now between communism and socialism that have been wiped out over the course of the last, 100 years. Why do they not? The left loves to talk to people who they feel are marginalized. Whether they be LGBTQ or black or Hispanic, whatever it may be, they love to pull these people out and stand them up as examples. But God forbid they talk to anybody that's lived through a hardship on anything that they don't support, because they just have to ignore those people and pretend that they don't exist, or that that they suffered under a system which, with a slight tweak would just be fantastic.
Well, and any modern day commie will tell you that the Soviet Union wasn't real communism. It was state capitalism. So capitalism killed all of those people. There's a guy in Canada who grew up and lived as an adult under Soviet oppression. And he goes to these protests where you have these college student commies come out there, and they're drawing chalk, hammer, and sickles on the floor, and he'll start talking to them and asking them questions. And when they realize that he grew up in the Soviet Union, they can't get out of there quick enough.
Of course not.
They can't get out of there quick enough, because what are you going to say? What are you going to say to this guy? It's
well, at least they have the option of retreat as opposed to the Russians during World War II when the Soviet Union didn't have enough bullets, so they just shoot their own troops when they tried to retreat with their empty guns.
Yeah. I mean, these kids, they're and it's something I'll bring it back to my book. Is they're I was trying to explain this to someone the other day. I was saying that because when I was growing up, my mom, even though we grew up very poor, there was a time when my mom, most of my childhood, my mom didn't work. She stayed at home. So she was there when I left for school. She was there when I got home from school. And, she tried to do the best she could. And I had my dad constantly preaching against communism, against Russia, preaching against telling me about what was going on in Cuba. My uncle's doing the same thing. So basically I was raised in this environment where, I was raised in a strongly patriotic, household, which is something that has its own, which I think has its own problems. But the, kids nowadays, both parents are working. The internet and, the internet and video games and whatever are what's raising them. So I think by the time they go off to college, it's not like they have a foundation or any kind of bedrock. Yeah. I think they have Play-Doh up there, and the professors can mold it in any way they can.
Well, I agree completely with what you just said, and you say you listen to the show regularly. I made this conjecture, and backed by nothing other than my own theory, but that because parents are working, they're checked out, and parents, in truth, from these generations that are in place right now, tend to be more self-centered in general. Anyway, it started with the boomers, and it's been passed along to their children. But you do have these kids that do not have that bedrock, as you said. They're not interacting. They're not the sense of community and the sense of personal interaction isn't there. The sense of being able to address ideas and discuss concepts isn't there. And yeah, you do have them going down these. Either I think they're the complete, almost blank slates where they can be completely impacted when they do go to college, you get exposed to a community of their peers where you're kind of immersed in that. Or, as I had said earlier, I think that a lot of the violence that we see now comes directly from the style of parenting that currently exists today and this emphasis on the digital commune rather than personal interaction, because you have all these different routes that you can take down the internet. You've got people that go home, they go from school where they're on their phones all the time to home where they're on the computer to the video games to whatever else. They're not interacting with friends. They're not interacting with family. And thus, it's so much easier for them to simply result to or react violently when anything challenges their ideas or challenges their state of being. And some of these kids go far beyond what we'd expect with extreme violence, shooting up the schools. And other ones, though, turn out to be these social justice warriors where they've got this one idea that they believe in wholeheartedly and blindly. And if anyone dare challenge it, they don't have the ability to actually address it or listen to anyone else's ideas. And the only response to that is overwhelming violence, aggression, screaming, shouting, or a complete mental breakdown.
Well, they don't know how to deal with an opinion that's different than theirs. When I was growing up, I grew up on the streets of New York, and we ripped each other all the time. We would just hang out and make fun of each other. And I mean, sometimes it would break down into fights. I've been punched in the mouth. I've been punched in the face. I've been knocked to the floor. How many of these kids these days have had that happen to them? Yeah. I'm sorry. I mean, I know it sounds old, and I don't want to sound like a boomer because I think I think they're absolutely the worst generation. The absolute worst generation. But that really helps you to grow when you're interacting face to face with kids and people your own age, even people who are older. And they're telling you like how it is, and if you talk back to them, they might give you a smack.
Yeah,
and I think it's a good thing.
I agree. That's one of the things. A lot of libertarians are fans of peaceful parenting, which I think has a lot of values that are good. But I do, at the core of me, think that just like you said, there is a benefit to knowing for a fact that there can be a physical repercussion for something that you say or do. And if you're raised in an environment where you're never touched, where you can say or do whatever you want, and the worst that'll happen to you is somebody says you shouldn't say that or go to your room. Well, you're going to be pretty entitled to say whatever you want, and at some point you're going to say the wrong fucking thing to the wrong fucking person, and it's not going to end very well for you.
No, I mean, I think the first time I ever took a full on punch to the face, I was like 12 years old, and it, I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, I look back on it and it helped.
Yeah,
it wasn't. And I also, and I also want to make the point, it's parents don't even.
And it was Murray Rothbard.
Yeah, but parents don't even have to be the ones to do this. It just, if it's your peers,
right,
that can help. That can help you to grow. Getting in a fight. I mean, I didn't want to fight when I was a kid and everything, but every time I did, what's funny is when I was a kid, I got in a fight, I usually ended up being friends with that person.
Yeah. Oh, I all the time. I had the same experience.
Now you go in and shoot up. Now they go in and shoot up the school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then again, we weren't all, I mean, what were we on? We smoked a lot of weed and we did some drinking.
Right. It wasn't 50 different psychotropic drugs that these kids are prescribed these days.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what the hell that stuff's doing I mean, especially, I've taken like Xanax as an adult, and it doesn't affect me in a weird way. It just really makes me want to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. But I know people who it makes them almost suicidal. So what are these drugs doing to a mind that hasn't even fully formed? I mean, some doctors believe that the mind really doesn't fully form until you're 25 years old. Yeah. So you're giving these drugs, Ritalin, which is basically methamphetamine.
Yep.
You're giving that to a 12, a 13-year-old, and then you're wondering why the kid may have behavioral problems?
Well, what I think is interesting is that people are finally starting to take a little bit of a closer look at the effects these drugs are having on kids and how they're turning into, psychopaths and suicidal maniacs and all those other things. But at the same time, the same people that are saying we have to get rid of all the guns and that's going to solve our children shooting up the schools problem are also the ones that are advocating giving drugs and completely doing hormone therapy to children as young as 5 or 6 if they think that they might be a girl in a boy's body.
It's absolutely insane.
It's just madness. And to voice that opinion, I mean, you look at people like Owen Benjamin, who've taken a very strong stance on it. To voice that opinion can get you completely eviscerated, and to the point you make in your book, and we've all seen it, can get you completely torn down, can get people coming after you to try to get you fired from your job for voicing what is, in a sane world, a completely rational point of view that maybe we should hold on a second before we try to completely alter the chemical makeup of someone's brain and body before they even hit puberty.
I mean, the kid's 6 years old. If the kid says he wants to stay up till 11 o'clock at night, you're like, no, go to bed.
Right. Yeah.
So you're not, you don't allow him to make that decision, or her, right, but you allow him or her to make a decision that you're going to basically stunt. You're going to stunt their reproductive growth.
Yeah.
What kind of dystopian, what kind of dystopian fucking horror is this?
Yeah, it's utter madness. So on that note, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and do a little talk about some other crazy things going on in the world. So guys, we'll be right back in just a moment with more Mance Rayder. We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. Those epic words from Archilochus can sum up your ability to succeed or fail in business. I want to recommend Conversation Mat Time to our listeners as a way to hone your one-on-one conversation skills in a role-playing session that can help take you to the next level. During 25-minute sessions, you'll work through the best way to approach that raise, that interview, or that relationship with a practiced professional that will provide the confidence and experience you need to get paid what you're worth or take that interpersonal risk you've never been able to conquer. Just like in jiu-jitsu, the difference between a novice and a black belt is mat time. Train to win. Visit conversationmattime.com and take advantage of a free 15-minute consultation just for listeners of this show. All right, welcome back to Electric Libertyland, episode number 75. So I am here with Mance Rayder, author, podcaster, shining beacon of memedom in our liberty world. So I wanted to, we just finished talking about a little bit of this Venezuela talk with John Oliver, but while we're talking about people that are in the media, prominent comedians that happen to have talk shows. Why don't we talk a little bit about Miss Samantha Bee? So let's hit on Samantha Bee being honored by the Television Academy right after she called Ivanka Trump a feckless cunt on cable television, and then talk a little Joy Reid, and then we'll wrap it up with a nice cake. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. All right. So getting into this first topic. So we're just talking about John Oliver, who John Oliver, I can respect him. Well, every day my respect for him gets less and less. I'll say that. But
yeah, I used to love the guy. I can't watch him anymore.
No, it's almost like Colbert, in that Colbert was, I mean, his show was so brilliant when he was being that Republican character, that GOP character. He did an incredible job being funny, but also being pretty equal as far as the sides he'd skewer. And his character was hilarious. Now he's just a complete shill for the left. Every day it's an anti-Trump thing. John Oliver is basically the same thing. And it's, especially when you look at the Venezuela stuff, it's just the basest, stupidest commentary. And that's what really bugs the shit out of me, is that these people, they're not making real arguments. They're making these dumb arguments that the left makes. And it's the guise of comedy, slapping people over the head with this kind of limp dick humor, which is just what I call the humor of agreeability. And Samantha Bee is just the female version of John Oliver, essentially.
Look, I grew up in a time when stand-up comedy was huge in my house. I grew up with, my parents liked Red Fox and Flip Wilson, Richard Pryor, all the most irreverent shit. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm all for irreverent shit if it's funny.
That's the thing. If it's funny,
this is just cruel. I mean, you're just being cruel. There's nothing funny about being cruel. Don Rickles, people used to say, "Oh, Don Rickles." My grandmother couldn't stand Don Rickles because he was just insulting everybody. But he wasn't serious. You know, he was having fun. But this is it's fucking cruel. I mean, it's like, how do you?
It's cruel, and it's on the level of, so this Samantha Bee is just, like I said, just called Ivanka Trump a feckless cunt. She's being honored with an award. And this is days after Roseanne's show is canceled, of course, because Roseanne had the gall to, and granted, she should not have done this. It is definitely, it harks of racism to call anybody of African-American heritage, which I don't even think she might have realized at the time, but I
didn't know she was African-American.
No, she doesn't really look like it. She looks like she's, Muslim American, but and she is. But, right after this, Samantha Bee says, but because it's not only is it not funny and it's just cruel, but it's also, when you're talking about Ivanka Trump, she's basically, I think the full comment was something about pushing her tits up to talk to daddy, which of course, not only are you calling her a cunt, which in our American lexicon is the worst thing you can call a woman. Meanwhile, in England, you could say it all you want. But also, she's insinuating that Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump are incestuous.
Yeah.
So I mean, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Well, she's also insinuating that she would have something to do with immigration policy, and if Ivanka Trump had something to do with immigration policy, she'd be pissed off at that.
Right. Exactly.
She'd be like, "Oh, well, why does she have anything to do with immigration policy? She's just a daughter of the
rich
president.
White girl."
I mean, why should she have an opinion? But all of a sudden, she's a feckless cunt if she doesn't have an opinion.
Right.
And if she did have an opinion, she'd be a feckless cunt.
Exactly. You're cunted if you do, and you're cunted if you don't. And the picture she's covered, it was like something on Twitter too of her like kissing her baby. And this is the thing that's triggering the left now is the president's daughter, who has, by the way, been a very outspoken advocate for so many things that the left cares about.
Yeah, I know.
And yet like you're saying, she can't win. And on top of that, Roseanne now gets her show canceled, and the Television Academy is still going to move ahead and honor Samantha Bee with this award. And I'm going to click. I apologize. I should have pulled this up earlier to find out what this fucking award was called, but is going to honor her with an award just, days after. I just, the complete bias, the unforgivable, blatant and transparent bias that is held within the entertainment community and just in leftists in general is just, it's unforgivable. Like I still am shaking my head. I can't fucking believe it.
Yeah, I mean, could you, if Roseanne wasn't pro-Trump, they probably would have forgiven her for what she said.
Oh, of course.
I mean, and that's the thing is there's no. I would have, I could give the left so much more of a pass if they were still anti-war.
Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, I can't even deal with them. I can't even think about them without getting upset because they just, as long as you're on their side, they give you a pass no matter what you do.
Right. But as we're seeing with Joy Reid now.
But at least if they were anti-war still, we could get together on something, but I can't get. I mean, these people are friggin' lunatics, man. And that's what I write about in my book. They're absolute lunatics. Think about it. College campuses, in the 60s, they were anti-war and pro-free speech.
Yep.
College campuses now, they couldn't care less about all the brown people that Obama was bombing and that Trump has doubled down on.
Yep.
And they're anti-free speech. If you were a college professor, the easiest thing that you could do right now is talk about the cholera outbreak in Yemen and how the United States backing Saudi was the cause of this. But no, they're worried about microaggressions and shit like that. They're fucking nuts, man.
What blows my mind, too, is the fact that, we all know one of the biggest complaints we have about educators is that once they're tenured, they're almost impossible to get rid of. So that those same people that have been at Berkeley, that were part of this rights movement, that were probably young bucks, those old fucking hippies are still sitting around rotting their assholes off, sitting in those lecture halls right now. So the question I have to ask is, okay, have your politics radically changed with the left, or are you just a blatant shill? I mean, are you adjusting just because you don't want to be able to go back and actually look at what's become of your once precious party and your once precious ideals, and you're just willing to go along to get along now, and you're more afraid of the students than the students should be ever. I mean, when I was in college, we had the freedom of speech. Obviously, I went to Penn State. There was not that much fear, but now it seems like the school administrators who are supposed to be making the rules, creating rules that people are supposed to abide by, they're now in complete and utter terror of the student body. And thus they just bow down to them. I mean, we are seeing this like with Evergreen College and Brett Weinstein, where the president of the school holds this town hall thing with all these students just screaming at him. And none of them get fucking expelled. These kids are cornering a very progressive teacher and screaming at him. They're saying there's physical violence being threatened against him. None of them are expelled. Not a one.
No, I mean, when I was in school, I went to New York City public schools up until 8th grade. And then I went to private school for high school. But I remember going to public school, and these teachers, say there was a teacher who, was meek. There was another teacher who was ready to step in and stop any kind of aggression.
Oh yeah.
And nowadays, they won't do anything. I mean, Evergreen they literally were having students patrolling the campuses with clubs and baseball bats, like calling out faculty.
Yeah, it's like the fucking Warriors.
Faculty
come out.
And then if you look at it, and if you want to have some real fun, look at the curriculum in that school.
Oh, I'm sure it's all.
They're not learning. They're not learning anything. They're not learning.
It's just different variations on gender studies over and over and over again.
Oh, even in the sciences.
Yeah.
Even in the hard sciences aren't even hard sciences there.
We've seen that go by the wayside. There's no such thing as reality or fact anymore. It's all very subjective on your personal truth, as the left has coined it.
Yeah, man, if I had a kid right now who was of age, getting ready to think about college, I'd be pushing. I'll pay for every cent of trade school so you can learn and do whatever you do. Don't go near one of those. I mean, I would hope that I would, have, molded a brain that would be, even more hardcore than me by this point. But I wouldn't. I would do everything to keep them away from a college campus. And if they wanted to go to a college campus, this is on you, buddy. I ain't giving you a cent.
Yeah, exactly right, man. I mean, it's like I think it would have to be a very specialized thing. Like if my kid's like, I just want to be a neurosurgeon, Dad, I'd be like, well, I guess I can't get around that one. All right, I suppose. But yeah, otherwise, you're going to a trade school. And honestly, I've talked to a lot of people that are around my age. Like I'm right about 38 now, living in LA, which, you know, we have kids a lot later than everybody else because of the goddamn taxes and expense of living here, which is skyrocketed. But a lot of my friends are starting to have kids, and, you know, we're talking about this stuff, and everybody's kind of on the same board, whether they're progressive or leaning towards the right or libertarian. Hard to find a righty, so libertarian or left. But same thing, you know, it's just like the value's not there. And the more you see, so many of these states, like New York State, is pushing through this community college for everybody. You say, what a colossal waste of money. Not only are you going to have kids just go and drop out after a semester or two to go pursue a trade school or to go do something else anyway, because not everybody's meant for fucking college, but you're also just degrading what it means to get a college degree. So you're just going to, like, the issue of student debt, which the left loves to cry about, forget that it's already backed by the government, which is half the problem. But then we get into the fact that just when you have this emphasis on education and you're telling everybody you have to go to it, you're basically just evening out the marketplace so that now that's the new high school degree. So what's the goddamn point of it?
Yeah. And you're charging and you're forcing a kid to go into debt for the next 30 years,
right?
You know, because you're giving away free money. And I mean, it's remarkable.
Exactly.
It's remarkable.
The good news, at least, is that I've seen places like in Missouri, in Evergreen, and a few other of these places where it's actually been blown up. You know, I know Evergreen for a fact this has happened, but you are seeing enrollment completely bottom out at these schools, which is awesome. Good. So there you go. The free market, at least in this respect, is getting a win for us. It's a loss for them, and it's a huge win for the free market and for sanity, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah, that works for me.
All right, so let's see. Let's wrap it up. I mean, I was going to talk a little bit about Joy Reid just because. Well, I'll do it real quick. So Joy Reid, of course, she has this blog that was back in the day, and it was, you know, some stupid name blog she just wrote on, and it was forgotten. She shut it down once she became a big star, and it was archived though, where people could access these internet archives. The Wayback Machine, I think it's called. So people dug up these old posts of hers, which were very much anti-gay, questioning whether or not 9/11 was an inside job, all sorts of anti-gay and anti-Muslim views. So they were brought to the surface. And of course, Joy Reid first claims that she was hacked, which is just such a dumb excuse. But, you know, it's like the thing people just always default to. But now has actually admitted that she did write them. And as we are seeing, and as you stated earlier, when you are on the left side, there is no criticism. It is just whisper quiet. MSNBC won't address it. No one on the left is attacking Joy Reid and tearing her apart. It truly is incredible, the suit of armor, impenetrable armor that you put on when you become a leftist.
She's not smart. Her writing is horrible. And she's basically just regurgitating whatever they tell her to.
That is exactly right.
She is not. We're not talking about a thinker here. You know, we're not talking about somebody who could actually sit down and write their own book. Decide I got to write on this topic. No, she's going to have 12 or 13 staffers write a book for her, and she's. I mean, this is not. I mean, the majority of these people. I mean, some of them. I mean, obviously, someone like Maddow. I mean, I think she went to. She went to Oxford, so obviously obviously she has a brain in her head.
She has a brain. She just doesn't have a heart or any sort of journalistic integrity.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, at least she could sit down and write. I mean, Joy Reid is reading off of a teleprompter. She's reading what they. I mean, these are just these are not people. These are not people who should be leading thought. You know, they shouldn't be influencing thought because they don't have an original thought in their head.
No, it's just the epitome of useful idiots, and it's buying into this. I guess what you'd call it the empiricism of, or the American empire of media, which essentially we all know that, so many of these companies and corporations are traced back to like the Foreign Relations Council, or the Council on Foreign Relations. There are so many people that sit on the high level boards or have high level positions in all of these media companies that just basically you can see the trickle down effect it has, where they are dictating the stories that come out, how they get covered. Some of them may be a little bit more right leaning. Most of them are left leaning, but there's like 3 different organizations that kind of control the narrative in all these different factions.
Oh.
And yeah, Joy Reid's just the latest in line. Well, she's a happy parrot.
I talk about it in the book. I remind people, MSNBC was a cheerleader for the Iraq invasion.
Oh yeah,
all of them were. CNN, the New York Times. The New York Times was one of the biggest cheerleaders. One of the said clearly, put out articles that there were WMDs in Iraq. I mean, they're being controlled by somebody. I mean, to say they're being controlled by somebody is to be, it sounds conspiratorial. But I mean, these people are not writing. These people don't have free. Don't have the ability to just go out there and write whatever they want. It has to go through an editorial board.
Oh yeah,
a lot of it's being written for them, especially when you get into the media and you get into the TV media or the radio media.
Oh yeah,
print media. Print is going through multiple edits. And nowadays, it's not even print media. It's they need clicks.
Right.
So
and it's not even original. Like that, the biggest issue I see today with the way journalism is handled too is that, and this has been, I was talking to a journalist recently about this who's complaining the same way, is that you not only have people that are not cross-checking the facts, they don't have any journalistic integrity to actually delve deep and find out what the truth is, but because of the fast-paced way in which news rolls out now, typically you'll have one source break news, and then all the other people that are on the news side, they will jump on that one story and re-report the same news rather than actually delving in to find out whether it's true or not or do their own story. So to your point, it's clicks. They say, we've got to get on it now. So we're going to repurpose this story and republish it, citing this one source. So you have one source which can easily be proven false within the next few days, but the damage is already done. The scenarios and the narratives are already out there, and good luck fixing it once it's there.
Yeah. Do you at all want to talk about the Supreme Court decision from yesterday?
I do. Well, let's talk about it right now. We'll end on this. So this is the Masterpiece Bakeshop Ltd. Versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, and the owner Jake Phillips, who had he refused to sell a wedding cake to a gay couple. Now, apparently he has no problem selling cakes in general to gay people, and there was another similar circumstance with 2 women who owned a bakery and had a large gay patronage, and were sued to the tune of they were awarded $185,000 in a separate case, which destroyed the business. Yeah.
That was in Portland. Yeah.
Was it? Yeah. So
I write about it in the book.
Okay, perfect. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this Masterpiece Bakeshop thing, people are saying, the people on the left are saying, oh my God, what an assault on LGBTQ rights. And people on the right are cheering it as a victory for religious freedom. But from what I can tell, reading multiple different reports and analysis of it, this has really been jack shit that came down to almost a technicality, although an important one, in the way the case was argued. So what's your take on it? And then I'll weigh in with mine. Yeah,
I mean, it looks like they just want to try and kick it back to the state, and they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
But this is my thing about this. I'm on social media every day. I mean, you've seen my Twitter timeline. I spend way too much.
I have seen it.
Yeah, there's way too much. I spend way too much fucking time on that thing. But when you look at tariffs, when you look at net neutrality, when you look at all of this stuff, this issue, there is more cognitive dissonance on this issue than anything, because basically what these people think that this guy should be forced. Basically, this gay couple should be forced to give money to this bigot. I mean,
right.
They're talking about. They're basically saying you got to force this. You have to give this bigot. This bigot has to accept their money.
Right.
Okay. But what I want to bring it back to is I want to bring it back to my ideology. Yeah, a lot of people call me an anarchist, call me a libertarian, anarcho-capitalist. When it comes right down to it, I'm a voluntarist.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that all interaction in this life should be voluntary. And this case is a perfect example for me to talk about voluntarism, is that there is no, if I, as a consumer, can choose which cake shop I want to use, that owner should be able to choose what customers they want to deal with. It's also a private property issue. Until when he bakes that cake belongs to him up until the point where there is an exchange, and it's his private property. And if your private property, you should not be forced the government should not be telling somebody what they need to do with their private property. If I bake a cake and I decide that I want to put rainbows and all this shit all over it, and then I decide I want to drop it on the floor and destroy it instead of sell it to people, I should be able to do that.
But
It's
and you can call it, and if you called it art, then you could really get away with it.
But, I mean, that's what this, I looked at this case, I was like, and I tweeted this out. I said, if you ever want to explain voluntarism, because I had people arguing with me all day yesterday. I was like, look, you cannot force another human being to interact with another human being. You're basically saying that a Jewish baker should be able to, if a Nazi comes in, the Jewish baker should be able to be forced to bake a cake that has swastikas on it and all this, or a halal restaurant should be forced to make bacon and serve it to whoever wants it.
Right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
It is the exact same, and people seem that they can't wrap around it. And like you said, the cognitive dissonance is clearly on display because those are very good examples. The fact that you can simply say, well, he should have to do it because this is something that we consider to be a universal right now. And let's not forget that this was not considered a universal right as early as 10 years ago. But now, suddenly in the last 10 years, now this right trumps religious freedom. It trumps private property rights. And like you said, it's just the basic premise that you are in control of your own work. And, it's like anything. If you are going to say that somebody has to do it, they are essentially a slave. Now, you can say they're being compensated, but slaves were compensated arguably by providing them food and shelter for their labor. If you can force somebody to do something at your will and they have no say in it, you are basically making them into a slave. And that is what this is effectively arguing. And what drives me, especially crazy though, is that people don't understand just the broader spectrum of these kind of things. And also that in this day and age, this legislation is completely unnecessary. I mean, I could say, yes, I'm all for obviously gay rights. I'm all for the gay marriage. Libertarians have always been for gay marriage, but the fact that people can't see that, I completely lost my train of thought there.
Go ahead. Take your time.
All right, hold on. Wait a minute. Let me go a step back. So that people can't see that this is far easily solved with just social media, with Yelp, with all these other platforms that have been invented purely for the sole reason of letting people know if somebody's a cocksucker in regards to their business. Why do we need any of this? Just blow them out of the water on social media. I'm sure it'll have far more of a result. And to your point, why do you want, you're going to have your wedding with this guy's fucking hate cake? Yeah, why do you want it?
Who knows what this guy's done to the cake? I told someone on social media yesterday. I said, she was talking. It was a female, and she's like, "Well, what if I live in a small town and there's only one mechanic, and that mechanic doesn't want to deal with me?" I'm like, in my history from running businesses, if somebody doesn't want to deal with you, you need to do some self-examination.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'll tell you. And this is exactly what I told her. Life is too long to deal with assholes. And I have had to fire customers before.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't feel bad about it.
No, nor should you. And that is voluntarism. You have that choice. It's your life. It's your work product. It's your business. It's your whatever to lead the life as you choose. And while it might be inconvenient to somebody, an inconvenience is not a reason to get the law involved to destroy someone's career and livelihood and grandstand so that everybody can see it. And, fuck those two guys. Fuck those two guys.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And the guy should just bake them a cardboard cake and then charge them $17,000 for it. At this point, all right, what are they going to do? They can't back out of it.
Yeah. Well, they still would have got, but the one in Portland was actually worse because, they had to come out of pocket $130,000.
Oh, yeah.
It destroyed the business. That's why I picked that one. The Colorado one was much more famous, yeah. But the one in Portland, and then I talked about the people.
Did you mention the burrito chicks? Yeah, that story. Oh my God, man! When that went down, because it's like I visited Portland, but Portland's another one of those weird cities where it's like Portland. It's so it's like we've got strip clubs everywhere, and you can drink, and it's like the most strip clubs in any city in the world. But how dare you try to open a burrito restaurant here? It's just like the moral. What is outrageous than morally? And by the way, I am totally fine with strip clubs, but it just is such an odd dissonance to me where you go, okay, so you're totally fine with somebody serving booze and arguably objectifying quote unquote women, which I would argue is in fact empowerment. But meanwhile, if two female entrepreneurs, which you'd think you would support, female entrepreneurship, wanted to have their own take, using Mexican recipes that they learned. You're calling it cultural appropriation, which of course is how ideas, concepts, free trade, etc., have spread throughout the decades. And you're going to shut them down? You're going to just holy shit.
I don't even think they referred to it as cultural I think they referred to it as colonizing. Like they were colonizing their recipes because they had gone on vacation in Mexico and had asked a bunch of burrito vendors for different recipes, and they gathered together the recipes.
Which the burrito vendors gave them voluntarily, correct? So they didn't fucking hold guns up to their heads and be like, "Give me all of your burrito recipes."
It's like the strip clubs you're talking about. Are there any strip clubs? And maybe there are strip clubs in the United States where girls are being forced to dance and dance naked. But I've never been in one. Not that I've ever been in one.
No, of course not. Never. Not without my mask on, my trusty Tonto mask. Yeah, but it's like so. Just circling back real quick on this, because there's the one thing which, like you said, they kind of punted it back to the States, and the one issue I want to address in this is the reason they were able to weigh on the Baker side is that Colorado apparently said that as a vendor within the state, he was not allowed to reject their claim on the basis of religion, basically saying that because the state, which is supposed to have nothing to do with religion, was operating and licensed his business, that somehow you had to be this is the logic, as far as I can tell, in the state of Colorado, that basically you have to be atheist to own and operate a business within the state of Colorado. So the Supreme Court rightly said that's fucking retarded and pushed it back. But yeah, they didn't address the actual issue of free speech or freedom of religion or private property rights or anything along those lines in their decision.
You realize in the span of like 10 or 15 years, Colorado has gone from one of the coolest places to live to like one of the most SJW.
Yeah.
Ridden.
Seattle's the same way, man. Seattle and Colorado and in Washington, I guess the state, but Seattle's the worst of the worst. Yeah. They both just gone to hell in a handbasket.
Well, California. 45 years ago, California was, gay people couldn't become teachers in San Francisco.
Wow.
California was Ronald Reagan was governor.
Yeah.
Oh,
Schwarzenegger was governor here. Just think about that.
And I'm not saying that was a good thing back then. I think it was absolutely a horrible thing. But you can actually straddle the middle sometimes instead of going all the way in one direction. Nobody wants to straddle the middle because I live my whole life trying to straddle the middle, trying to just live my life peacefully as possible, and try to be as consistent as possible. But it's really hard And I do not think that people, I constantly have to learn more. I constantly have to read. I constantly have to examine myself.
Mm-hmm.
And no one wants to do that anymore.
No, of course not.
They're just too lazy to do it.
No one wants to challenge any of their own ideas, first and foremost. And it's because to challenge your own ideas might mean that you were possibly wrong at one point in time. And of course, that's unforgivable.
Yeah, I've been wrong 10 times today. So.
The most recent instance of being wrong was the idea to come on this podcast.
No, absolutely, dude, man. I love your podcast.
Well,
right.
Hey, I got one question for you to end this, and
Sure.
that is the name Mance Rayder. This is clearly taken from Game of Thrones, right?
Right.
Okay, so why that character? Because I'm trying to remember why. I'm trying to like think back and remember because clearly I'm like this. Okay, this is a pen name. Right. So why that name?
He was called the King Beyond the Wall, which the name of my podcast is Free Man Beyond the Wall. He's basically the king of the free people, the people that didn't want to have anything to do with the society, didn't want to have anything to do with the crown. So they went beyond the wall and they formed their own society. And basically, it's a very anarchist society. The only reason they call him the king is because every once in a while the tribes might want to fight with each other, and he's able to.
He's a mediator.
He's able to mediate, and he's able to say, "Look, we all basically share the same belief system. Let's not fight amongst each other. We have much bigger things to worry about on the other side of that wall." So I think, especially in the books, in the TV show, Mance is sort of, I wouldn't say he's, been gelded or anything like that, but it's not as powerful a character as in the book, but in the books, but he's the kind of character. And I basically what it was is I came up with the idea of the name of the podcast first, Free Man Beyond the Wall, and I knew I didn't want to use my real name because I'm not.
Too much to lose.
Working. I like the job I'm at right now.
Right. Yeah.
I'm working my way to try and get out. To not need that job anymore. As a content creator, as a writer, things like that. But while I'm doing that, I'm going to protect myself as best I can because we live in an age of doxing and all sorts of just craziness and everything. And also my wife is very active on social media. She has a podcast and I don't want, I didn't want anybody to be able to relate her to me.
Yeah, no, I understand. I do PR for a living, as you know, and I there's always that. I also worry about that slightly, but I figure I do PR. I can spin my way out of it if anything goes haywire.
But what's funny though? I'll get I'll get correspondence in my legal name. Mm-hmm. And I will look at my legal name like I don't know what it is because it's like I've literally become. It's getting to the point where I may even have to legally change my name.
You're writing not an address at all your envelopes. You just write not an address at all your bills. You just figured out a great way to get out of your bills, man.
I'm serious. I have stuff delivered to my home address in my name in the name Mance Rayder. So it's it's just basically, and what's funny is that, not everybody watches or read Game of Thrones and everything. So it's like when I have people all the time go, "That's not your real name." And I'm like, how? Have you ever heard the name Mance?
No. It's like my honest. I always want to say Rance because of Rance Howard, but
and one of my best friends growing up was named Rance, so it's like, so it's funny, yeah.
All right, well, you know what, Mance Rayder, thank you, whoever you are, man of mystery, for joining us on the podcast today.
Can I say something?
Sure.
The books are on Amazon, but I've become very passionate about cryptocurrency, and on my website, freemanbeyondthewall.com/store. I have a store on there. Both of the books are on there. And you can buy either of the books or both of the books, and only for cryptocurrency on my website. So if you want to use Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Dash, XMR, Litecoin, Ethereum, please. I would actually, at this point, I would rather people would use cryptocurrency. And I encourage anybody out there who is an internet vendor, please do cryptocurrency as an option.
Yes, and you can donate to the Lions of Liberty podcast in cryptocurrency as well, guys. So don't forget that that is also an option for us, although it's hard to pick which one nowadays. So just go with good old-fashioned Bitcoin.
Yep. I mean, we won't even start a war about, what's, which cryptocurrency to use. But as long as you're using some kind of cryptocurrency, any information, you're going to give me your mailing information. It's going to be destroyed it's going to be destroyed immediately after I make a label and send you tracking information. I'm not going to keep this is going to be totally private. And that's what cryptocurrency was, what was created for in the first place. So
there you go. All right. Well, guys, to remind you again, you can listen to Mance's podcast, Freeman Beyond the Wall. You can see his porno movie with Mark Wahlberg called Freeman Beyond the Wahlberg, and also read his books, author of The Kids Are Not All Right and Freedom Through Memedom. So, once again, man, great having you on here. And by the way, I want to give a quick shout out at the end of the show to James Schumacher. He's a listener to our show. He's got a fantastic audio company, guys. So I want to remind you to check out Vertigo Entertainment, vertigo-entertainment.org. He did an awesome job recording the speeches that Mark and I gave at the Los Angeles Libertarian Convention we were asked to speak. So quick shout out for James. Good man. Otherwise, guys, thanks to Mance. Remind everybody out there, support our show, buy our stuff, and a reminder that we are now on Patreon. So if you do want to support the show, go to lionsofliberty.com/support and make sure to sign up on Patreon. If you guys are still on Podbean, switch over, please. We would love it. So from me, Brian McWilliams, from the Lions of Liberty and from Electric Libertyland, always stay plugged in to Liberty.